Talk family, and welcome back to another episode of Talk the Talk with me, Desh Pillay Bechin. Today's guest needs no introduction in the world of motoring. He is an industry icon, a pioneer, and someone I've had the honor of walking alongside for over a decade. Joining me in studio is none other than Jeff Osborne, former CEO of the Retail Motor Industry Organization, which is the RMI, the former head of Auto at Gumtree, former business development partner at TransUnion SA, and is now an independent auto industry consultant, and proudly is also our ambassador for the Women in Motoring South Africa movement. Jeff's legacy in the automotive industry is nothing short of legendary. He is a voice of wisdom, a pillar of strength, and above all, a true gentleman who has consistently championed progress, innovation, and inclusion across the trade. It's an absolute privilege to have him with us today, and I must say he is going on to almost 6 decades in the motoring industry. So I think it's 57 or 58, right, Jeff?
57, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very, very long time, and I know that there's only wisdom that I can draw from a gentleman like this, and I've been privileged to be around the likes of Jeff because of Jeff within the motoring industry. So let's dive in and talk to Jeff, and proudly, as always, this episode is brought to you by Sariti Solutions and MFC, a division of Nedbank. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Desh, and thank you for those very warm and generous words of welcome. Aww. Always a pleasure and honor to be here.
It's been 10 times now, I think. It's been 10 times that I've interviewed you, maybe even more, because I'm a few times here. Wherever I catch you, whether it's a festival of motoring or anywhere on my red carpet, we need an interview with Jeff. And I don't regret those moves because I know that I'm documenting a legendary's life. And one day after our times, okay, someone's going to see this legend and take these words of wisdom and apply it just the way I have, okay, and become the success that you had become in the industry. So I want you to, when you started, we had my first interview with you, by the way, on Talk the Talk, and we had 5,000 followers at that point in time. Currently, we have more than 150,000 followers. Wow. So I would like for you to please reintroduce yourself and tell us more about yourself, where you started. We're not going to rush this interview, so I'd like you to try and not leave out a lot of the information.
Okay, Desh, well, thank you for the invitation, the opportunity to give a sort of synopsis of, if you like, my motoring life. I think we'll keep it at that. It started as a child, essentially. I was reliably informed by my mother that my first word was, in fact, car. Oh, apparently.
Okay.
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's so many cliches and terms that describe people like myself, petrol heads and so on. And I self-confess that I am one. My wife calls it mad car disease.
I love that.
And I've told her the good news is there's no cure.
I love that.
But yeah, I started at an early age, and I started collecting this passion and obsession with cars. I started collecting, very popular in those days as kids, toys called dinky cars, dinky toys, made in the UK by Lesney Products. I remember that.
But you were born in South Africa, right?
I was born here, but of British parents.
Okay.
And I started collecting them at a very early age, 6 or 7, when I started school. And in fact, I still have some of those same cars, those same models.
Wow.
And I've collected many more since then. So at home, I have 2 massive display cabinets that are full of model cars.
Okay.
Some of which, as I say, I had when I was a child.
I love that. Can I ask you for a favor online? I mean, in front of the camera, would you mind taking a picture of those cars? And can we have it up on camera?
Absolutely.
Here? So Shola, we're going to have those photos right here.
I shall.
Okay, perfect. Thank you
I'll
so much.
send you that as soon as I get home.
I mean, if you don't mind sharing it with our community.
No, with pleasure.
Okay.
Absolute pleasure.
Right.
I look forward to that. And then, as I grew up, it was anything with an engine enthused me. And my dad was a handyman. He also came from the motor industry. In fact, he was with Rolls-Royce in the Royal Tank Corps in the workshops, working on Rolls-Royce tank engines and so on.
Wow.
So he qualified as a Rolls-Royce engineer, my dad, before the war, during the 1920s. So at home he used to a handyman. He did everything himself. We never took our car to a garage.
Right.
He would do all the servicing and repairs himself. So I started. That was the origin of my apprenticeship, working with and for my dad. And it's definitely it's the genetic thing, because my two older brothers absolutely hated it. First of all, I guess because it was imposed upon them by my father, as it was on me, but I enjoyed it. I loved getting my hands dirty. I loved working with him. And he was very strict about the theory. He'd always say to me, never ever put a spanner to anything unless you know exactly how it works, what it does, and what its function is.
Okay.
There's no guesswork in mechanics. Know the theory, read the book, and then diagnose and repair. And that's so that started at an early age. Then at the age of 16, I acquired my first licensed motorcycle, but before that I'd bought a moped from a neighbor for R5, I can remember, in a box. It was just bits and
like
pieces.
a real moped?
A moped, yeah, but it was called a Rex, R-E-X, a German
Okay, for
bike.
R5.
R5, a lot of money in those days, I might add. I'm talking about in the 60s. So I took it home and I built it up from all the bits and pieces in the box, with quite a significant bit of help from my dad. But to his credit, he kind of let me be as well. He watched over me, but let me rebuild this thing. Then he helped me respray it, and we got it going, and I used to drive it around. And then eventually, for my 16th birthday, I was very blessed, I guess, and privileged. I was given a brand new Zundap 50cc. And that was the beginning of my motoring career. So that was in 1964, I got my bike license.
Wow.
So that's how long I've been a licensed driver. I still ride bikes. I still love motorcycles. And horses. So allied to that, my sister and myself, we grew up in the north of Joburg, in Bryanston, when the smallest plot was an acre. Some were 3, some was 6. And all sand roads, and everyone rode horses. Well, a lot of people rode horses, and we certainly did as a family. So, allied to this, I also enjoyed the real horsepower. You know?
I think it goes hand in hand, right?
Yes. Well, you know, if you think about it, in the old days, that pride of ownership and that status symbol, as it was in the old days, prior to cars or the horseless carriage, as it was first called. These were carriages with engines, no horses, so they called them horseless carriages. But people, prior to that, you would distinguish a man's status by the type of horse he had.
Absolutely.
And the sort of carriage he had. So
it's actually quite funny. I had that conversation with Mr. Lazarus because he has this museum at Lazarus Motors, and he has, I think, a 1924.
This is Colin I've seen it, yes.
So
wonderful, yeah.
I think you and him are literally saying the same things in different words to me, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's gold.
No, Colin is a petrol head, and needless to say, so many of my contemporaries and peers throughout my 57 years in this industry are true petrol heads, some even more so than myself, plenty in fact. So it's an industry of autos enthusiasts, and that's been great. So, you know, my hobby became my career, one might say. And then I matriculated, and my father's vision was for me to do law, and it was kind of taken that I would do that. I also had aspirations in that direction. But I matriculated, and I'm not at whim. I actually did a little bit of research. I went and spoke to a company that was, in those days, was part of the Atkinson Oates Group, later on became Sydney Clough.
Right.
BMC, British Motor Corporation, Minnie's, Orson, Riley, Woolsey. I went and spoke to the MD at the time, and I said, look, I'm a matriculant, and I'm keen on a career in the motor industry, in workshops, and he said, well, why don't you do an apprenticeship if you have a matric? Instead of doing 5 years, you can actually only do 3 years, and then write your trade test, provided you go to Tech and Johannesburg Technicon and get your NTC3 and so on.
It was now 1968.
That correct,
Okay.
He gave me the forms. I mean, I wasn't old enough to sign it myself. Went home and showed it to my dad, told him what I'd just done. And I thought he'd go ballistic. But he said to which he said, well, I have no doubt that you haven't taken this decision lightly, and you've given it considerable thought. So he said, if that's what you want to do, he said, I'm not going to hold you back. Okay. So he signed, and I became an apprentice at Sydney Clough in the BMC workshops on Wolseley, Mini, Austin, Riley, Jaguar, and in Selby, in the southern suburbs, a huge building, massive workshops with separate sections. So there was a section for engine rebuilding, a separate section for transmission, for wheel alignment. And the training was amazing in those days. They'd take an apprentice and send you from one section to another, 3 months here, 3 months there, and so on. Also during that period, a three-year period, I was called up for the army. And again, I was called up for the infantry, and my father wrote to the Minister of Defence and said, no, you must take this youngster into the Technical Service Corps, the TSC, which is workshops.
Was it not compulsory at the time that when you complete matric, that you need to?
Unless you're going to university.
Oh,
if you were still studying, they would exempt. So,
oh, right, okay.
And in fact, I went a little bit later for that very reason, because I started the apprenticeship, and they could have then called me up immediately.
Oh, right.
But then I went to Joburg Technicon, I did my NTC 3, so that sort of drew it out a bit, delayed it a wee bit. Okay. But in any event, so I went into the Technical Service Corps in the Army, did my national service, which was a year, and I'll just stay with that very quickly because that became another parallel career for me, the Technical Service Corps, South African Army, because after the compulsory military basic period of a year, which later became 2 years, they then could call you up for the next 10 years on camps. And then we had the war with Angola, and we would be called up for up to 3 months at a time.
Wow.
Anything from 3 weeks to 3 months. And you were allocated to a citizen force unit. As was the case with myself, I became a member of 31 Field, which was a brigade field workshop, part of 7 Division. And eventually I became officer commanding. So I went to They sent me on courses at the military college.
Yeah.
I became an officer. This is after my basic training, and I rose through the ranks over a period. I was a captain for about 5 years, and eventually I became lieutenant colonel, commandant first, and then
a title you're very proud of.
Yes, indeed, because I enjoyed it, and it was run in those days with a typical sort of military environment, just like the British Army.
Please, can you share that photo with us as well? We'd like to put it up.
Yes.
This is a very different interview, viewers, because we've never gotten into this discussion before. When it's Jeff and I, it's always motoring. Jeff opened many doors for me 10 years ago, and it's just been work and crafting. And so now I want to share your life with my audience as well. So we're going to put that picture up. I know I often see it, but I'd like my audience to see it as well.
I'll see that with pleasure.
And what happened after? So that was now in the 70s.
Right, so this was now in the 60s. I did my national service in 68, 69. I came out, and then I carried on with Sydney Clough, BMC. As soon as I qualified, I wrote my trade test. I then was offered a job with Caltex Oil through someone I knew in the technical department of Caltex Oil. Big American company, 50-50 owned by Texaco in the States and Standard Oil Company of California, hence the name SoCal, Caltex. And I worked for them for the next 15 years on the technical side of their business, which was the design and distribution and marketing of lubricants and fuels. They even sent me overseas for almost 2 years. I went to Australia and I worked at Caltex International Technical Centre. And my speciality was designing lubricants, all the research involved in that, testing of lubricants and fuels. And then I came back here and they placed me in charge of the Caltex technical section of the Transvaal region. And we were providing and supplying petroleum product to mining and industry.
Okay.
So I wasn't on the garage side of it, not on the retail side, but on the industrial side of Caltex. Anyway, I was with Caltex for, as I say, for almost 15 years. Always had an aspiration to have my own garage.
I was waiting for ours the next
I always wanted to have a service station with petrol and workshops. That really appealed to me. And so one came up and I applied for it. It was actually not a Caltex site, they just didn't have anything at the time, but it was an SO site, which later on became Xenex, out in the northern suburbs in Fairlands, on what was then Deerfallon Drive, now Bayers Nordia, opposite Westbank on that corner, now an engine garage.
Right.
So I applied for that from SO, I was granted that garage, and I had it for 16 years, and then I acquired another 2 during that period. So I actually had 3 Xenex garages, all with workshops. I was the first to introduce the C-store concept, the garage store,
Wow.
in 1983, and I say it
Okay,
humbly.
now that's the year I was born. Thank you, Jeff.
I say that with humility, but
So wait, hold on. What you're saying is prior to that, there was no actual shop or store in garages?
no, there were corner cafes.
Okay.
They might have had a Coke fridge in the corner, and you could buy a cold drink at a garage on the driveway, but there was no shop. And when I was with Caltex in Australia, with the Caltex International Technical Centre, it was in the same building as Caltex Retail. And I spent some time with those guys. They sent me out on the road, and they were in the process, this was now 1981, they were in the process of closing workshops and turning the workshops at garages into convenience stores, which had already happened in the UK and was starting to happen in Europe. Okay. So I came back with the manual. There was nothing online then. I had this big book.
Okay.
And I saw the sense and the value in creating this one-stop facility. Fill up with petrol, buy your bread and milk, get your cold drinks, and so on. So when I opened this garage, the big old building, and I went to SO and I said, look, we've got a lot of unnecessary unused space here. I don't want to close the workshop, but there's a whole lube bay area it was 100 square meters. We could turn that into a shop. And the guy said, they were very good about it. They said, look, we've got it in the UK, SO have got shops there, but we don't think South Africa is ready for it because of one simple reason. And my Caltex colleagues, whom I spoke to as well, ex-colleagues, told me the same thing. They said, Jeff, it's not going to work here, with respect, because the South African motorist doesn't need to get out of their car to pay for fuel. And they still don't today. In the UK, in America, you have to go inside, pay at the till, put in your own petrol. They said, so why should they go in your shop? Wrong.
Very wrong.
Anyway, I did my own. So eventually they agreed. I said, go ahead. And they contributed to some of the building alteration. But they said, look, the shop is yours. We're not going to get involved. That's your own business investment. You want to do it, we will monitor it with interest, but we're not going to make an investment in it, which suited me, okay? I started it, and Desh, contrary to all of the prophecies that are compromised, someone even said to me from Caltex, in fact, a senior guy said, not only if you do get them into the shop, you're going to block your pumps. You need parking. There's not a parking. I'd already done my homework. Again, he was wrong. It takes longer to fill up a car, wash the windscreen, pump the tires, than it does to go into the shop and come out. How often do you go into the shop, you come back, they're still ready, they're still busy, Bottom line was, after 6 months, my fuel volume had gone up by 20%.
Oh, gosh.
And the shop just took off. It took off. And then I put in a high volume car wash, and the very first off premises ATM as well. And to the credit of Nedbank, who did that. Very sponsors. And I went to my bankers at the time, which was FNB, I might add. I went to Standard Bank, my private bankers, and they all said, no, we can't have an ATM. We have them at a mall or at a bank.
Right.
Because people deposit money, and we've got to collect that money. So you can't have it at a garage. It's going to be a security risk.
Right.
Nedbank came and said, you know what? How about if we put an ATM here where there's no depositing of cash, just withdrawal of cash?
Wow. Thank you, Nedbank.
And Nedbank put in, it was one of the very first ATMs at a garage on Deerfallon Drive, now Bayers Nordia.
Which was on for you.
At my Xenex garage. There was on the driveway a Nedbank on the corner outside. And people actually said to me, and people said, oh, it's going to be dangerous. And eventually my customer said, it's not. Because this is a 24-hour service facility. You've got security on the premises. There's lots of lighting. It's bright. The shop's open 24 hours. We feel very safe drawing cash. And the other feature was how often you go and you want to put in petrol, especially in those days, you couldn't pay with a credit card. You could, and that was the point, if you didn't have enough cash, you couldn't pay for your fuel. So you needed
Makes
cash.
sense.
And there's an ATM. So you can stop your car, say fill it up, walk across, get your cash.
Are you 100% confidently telling me that you were the initiator of this in South Africa?
We were the very first. That's a historical fact. As part of Xenix was the very first proper convenience store in
Well,
South
thank you,
South Africa.
because we rely on
Needless
these
to
stores.
say, within a few years, it didn't happen straight away, but others followed. Xenix then rolled it out to other sites.
Well done,
and they used to
Jeff.
use me to go and train those dealers, to train their staff, help them get them up and going. And then I saw Caltex started doing it, and BP started doing
Gosh.
it. And
Well, I know why I call you a legend. You are a legend in
so
my
the
life.
corner shops have gone.
But now I know why. Each time I meet you, I learn a bit more about you, and then I realize you become more legendary. So, oh my gosh. You need to write a book about that.
Thanks, Ash.
You really do, Jeff.
So an interesting sort of angle to this as well is that this essentially was the end of the corner cafe as we knew it, which, as we also know, were predominantly run by Greeks. In fact, there's a bit of that was incorrect because they were predominantly Greek Cypriots, but they were Greeks.
Okay.
Not surprisingly, so a lot of them started to close down. Not surprisingly, who owns within the next 2 or 3 years? Who suddenly started going into garages? All the Greeks.
Wow.
And the Indians,
Right.
because of the shop. And so the industry has changed. I mean, it's transformed dramatically over the years.
Right.
So anyway, I did that and whilst I was running the 3 Xenix service stations, I also served for 9 years as Xenix Dealer Council Chairman. Every oil company has their council.
How many Xenix garages were there?
In those days...
Was it a popular garage?
It was one of the smallest. It was one of the minor ones.
Okay.
Caltex was always the bigger one, and then Mobile became Engine.
Were they called
number 2.
petrol stations or garages?
All garages.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I'm just asking.
We used to say garages in the old days when the name changed.
Okay.
But slowly but surely, the landscape changed.
Okay. So, wow, Jeff, after that?
So after that, and during my period with Xenix, I served as Dealer Council Chairman for about 9 years, working with government in the Department of Mineral and Energy, with the Minister of Mineral and Energy, and Puk Botha was one once, worked with Puk. So we used to go as the team representing the retail sector of the industry. Okay. And you had Sapir, who represented the oil companies. We represented as executives, if you like, of the retailers, elected retail office bearers.
Right.
Puk Botha for a while, and then one of my customers, whom I met on the driveway one Sunday morning, after I'd opened the shop, I saw a gentleman at the till, and the queue was growing, but he had a loaf of bread and a milk, and I got a bit anxious. Sunday, this is 7:24, running a garage, so I got a bit anxious. I went outside into the shop. I had a one-way vision office window, and I went and I said, "Excuse me, sir, sorry about the delay." And he turned to face me, Cyril Ramaphosa.
Wow. Okay.
But at that stage, he was Secretary General of the trade union.
Okay.
He wasn't really in politics. And I said, "Wow, Mr. Ramaphosa, welcome. Do you stay nearby?" Driving a little city Golf, he had slacks and short pants.
Okay, this is 1970.
This is 1983, 84, 85.
1983, the year I was born.
Mid-80s.
Okay. 42 years ago.
And he said, "Yes, I've just bought a house around the corner in Berario. It was a suburb behind my garage." So he became a regular customer. I should see him on the driveway a couple of times a week, often chat to him. Then he got involved in politics, and he became Minister of Mineral and Energy.
Right.
So he was my customer, and I would work with him in the department on petroleum-related matters, and that's how I got to know Mr. Ramaphosa.
Amazing.
And my respect for him grew and was deeply entrenched during that period. Still have a high regard for the man. So, and then I sold the garages in '99, and I had another little business I was running where I was importing a range of car care products. I had a farm down in Natal, which I was farming part-time. Wasn't too sure what I was going to do, and I was approached by Robert Kaiser, who was with the MIF, previous name for the RMI.
Okay.
They were looking for someone to help them with a project on the fuel division, SAFTA, within it was called the FRA, in fact, Fuel Retailers Association, within the RMI, within the MIF. And would I like to come and help them on an 18-month fixed-term contract with this project, which I agreed to do. I had a bit of time on my hands. Long story short, again, 14 years later, I left there and I became CEO within a year of starting with this project because the acting CEO at the time, Derek Dixon, was the ex-McCarthy's chap, worked with Brunt.
Pretorius.
Brunt Pretorius. Derek said to me, he said, listen, I'm going shortly. And part of my mandate, I'm a temporary acting CEO. We're changing from MIF to RMI. We need a new guy.
Which was in 2000.
That was that was now in 99.
Okay.
Now in 99. Almost at the turn of the century. And I joined the RM in 99, and Derek said to me, why don't you apply? So in 2000, in the year 2000, at the turn of the century, I and a few other people, some who are still there, some who eventually became senior, all applied for this position. There were about 5 of us. I was fortunate enough to have got the position, and I remained there for the next 14 years as CEO of the RMI.
Wow.
And then I retired in 1965, at the age 65 in 2013, and I got this call, came through my PA. There was a man from Martin Herbst from eBay in San Francisco, wanted to talk to me about heading up and a startup called Gumtree Autos, because Gumtree existed as a horizontal platform with no staff here, no bank account, no registered company, and they wanted to take the autos section and create a dedicated autos division or vertical within Gumtree's to compete with the likes of Auto Trader and Cars.co's and Surfer Cars and so on. So they flew me over there for an interview, and I came back with a contract and a mandate and a budget to register a company, employ people, and get this Gumtree Autos up and running.
And that's where I met you.
And I did that for the next 8.5 years. And during that period, although we didn't retain it, but we did become number one.
Yep.
We overtook our competitors. We held the number one slot in all the metrics and verticals for a while. And then unfortunately eBay decided to sell it, and it went to new owners, and the focus wasn't so much on the auto side anymore. And I then was approached by TransUnion, and I was very privileged and humbled to do that if they felt I could add value, and I spent the next 4.5 years.
You were approached by me first.
Yeah. And that's it. So there we go. That's my...
Well, we are very honored to have you as our ambassador, and that is an official title that you will have until I'm around. So, Jeff, it is such a privilege and such an honor to have kind of documented a bit of your life. I think that's not all. You can write, I think, a sequel, of books. There's so much of advice to share, and you're always willing to do that on our platform. So thank you. A lot of what we do stems from me and the mentorship, not just for me, but there's so many people. If I say to them, like, Jeff Osborne is my mentor, and they would say, but no, he was my mentor long before you. I'm like, okay, but he's my ambassador now. So Jeff, how do you feel about all of these initiatives that I've begun, especially the Motoring Woman let's start with the Motoring Woman of the Year.
No, absolutely, Deshan, has been a very rewarding and amazing journey with you, and I can remember when you came to see me when I was with Gumtree, as you correctly said, and you were discussing this vision that you had for this Woman of the Year motoring, amongst other things. I mean, you had so many ideas. It was really, and that's one of the things I've always found about you, that your enthusiasm and passion is incredibly and automatically infectious. So you roped me in, and I was very, very happy to do that, and that's where the journey started. And I think, I have to say, and so many others will agree with me and testify to this, that what you've achieved is remarkable. It's gone from strength to strength. What started off as a vision and then a small initiative has become massive. It's the national massive. In fact, it rates, I think, on an international basis, comparatively speaking, as I understand. And it's been very gratifying and rewarding to have been involved and to have played a small role and made a contribution. And I'm humbled by the fact that you've elected to keep me on as your ambassador.
Always.
Always. And if I can continue to make a difference, I'm very happy and humbled to do that. But Desh, full marks to you, and you.
And I never got full marks for anything.
Well, you might not be aware of it.
I've never even gotten an award for anything.
But you too are well known. You are also a legend, and everyone knows you, and quite rightly so too. So
thank you, thank you, Jeff. I mean, if it wasn't I can. There's a lot of men, wonderful men, that have been instrumental, have been catalysts. Be it Fan and Dirk van der Walt. I mean, it actually started with the two of them, and then Doe Ledley, Andre Potgieter, Stefan Potgieter, now Dumisani Zwane, and Brad Keftel, of course, how can I forget? But it actually started with you, Jeff. You are the one that said, I know Jeff McIntosh, and I know this guy, and I know that guy, and I'm like, oh my God. Then I'm sitting amongst a bunch of CEOs, and just knowing that I had the pillar of strength who was Jeff Osborne, that was just a phone call away, that I could navigate these calls and navigate my way through the motoring trade as a journalist and as whatever it is that I'm trying to carve, because this has never been done before. Whatever I'm doing, I still don't know what I'm doing.
I think what is worthy of mention that I might have made the intros, but you earned and you won the respect and the credibility on your own.
Thank you.
And that was an unstoppable process.
And I think what through the past 10 years we've known each other, you might think, okay, well, I've introduced it to everybody, and then there's a new person that comes along, like the Scoville brothers, Eric and Chris Scoville, and like I see the two of you all. I didn't meet them through you, but I believe that then she knows Jeff Osborne, they're friends. Okay, I'm going to be her friend, and now they're great supporters. So
well, Eric served as chairman of NADA, and I was CEO of the RMI for a while. So, it's a small industry, relatively speaking.
It is, and then
so
you
many
get NAMSA and NADA as well. And I mean, NADA, Brandon Cohen, Tembin Kosifansi, those are guys that, I'm not going to say give me credibility, but they hear me out because they know Jeff Osborne is my ambassador. And then there's people from the RMI, Greg and the rest of the team.
Sure.
A whole lot of them. There's the new guys that have joined. But these are all introductions. We can't forget where the foundation was and who the foundation is. And the foundation is Jeff Osborne. It's always going to be Jeff Osborne for Dish.
But all underpinned by your absolute philosophy and vision to gender transform this industry. And which
do you think it's working?
There's no question about it, Dish.
From your transitioning from the 60s to the 70s to 80s, look, I can't say that I played that integral role because there were women in the industry. There were no women in leadership roles though when I started.
Absolutely.
That I have seen really catapult and have become something else. But are you seeing, is this still necessary?
Absolutely. It's been a remarkable transition and growth. And it's fair to say that it's not just limited to the South African motor industry. It was a global phenomenon. But it was particularly bad here, and it became apparent to me, it registered with me in my early years at the RMI. Every meeting I attended was all white male. Talking about the executives around the country.
Right.
And we started to talk about it. And I was spending a lot of time as well with government, and as I was saying, I was seeing the likes of Cyril Ramaphosa and others, and I started to become uncomfortable and concerned. And in fact, I had government officials very politely saying to me, Jeff, you guys need to change the face of the people you bring into these meetings. And they were so right. So transformation to me became highly imperative and necessary, and it needed to be accelerated at all costs. And then out of the blue almost, or probably wasn't out of the blue, I think a lot of thought was given to it, but it changed the landscape. The introduction of BEE and all the regulations around that. And as an RMI, to the credit of the entire industry at the time, Bron Pretorius was our president, and I was CEO, and he and I worked shoulder to shoulder on this initiative, and we absolutely were committed to making this work and to playing a role as a sector of the South African economy to bring about broad-based transformation. And obviously inclusive in that, and very important in that, is gender transformation. So when you came and spoke to me, I'd gone the journey fairly far within the RMI. It moved slowly, but then it started to gather momentum. So it was an easy fit for me to latch onto what your vision was.
So it was the right timing.
The timing was spot on. It was absolutely perfect. And I think to answer your question is that if one is to look around now, who the leaders are in this industry and all the events and the role that ladies play on a broad basis in this industry, it more than vindicates the initiative and the vision of people such as yourself.
Oh, thank you. And we hope to one day see more Martina Beanies and more of the
Lovely
ladies.
lady.
I mean, she's so powerful and she's utilizing that power,
Wonderful.
to empower. Because she's the MD of Fuzz.
Alex at Mercedes.
As well.
So many.
And
Marcia Mayaba.
Marsha Mayaba. And as I said, the CEO of Daimler Truck as well. So we're also moving into commercial. I actually started, I don't know if you are aware of this, but I started in 2010. So this is my 15th year in the industry. And we're celebrating that, Stefan van Gitter and Misani and I, on the golf course, by the way.
Oh, wonderful.
And you are welcome to join us.
I'm not a golfer, hey? I never had the time.
So we're doing that with about 10 CEOs from the OEMs and the groups in the next few months. But
I'd love to come along.
I would love to have you there.
Socially,
it happened at Steyn City.
Happy to be there.
Also in honor of Till Steyn, who I have interviewed his wife while she was still alive. So the trajectory has changed. So we were talking about Brandt. Brandt Pretorius, another legend in the industry, because he's legendary so much so. My father-in-law worked for Toyota for 40 years.
Oh, really?
And I know that Brandt at that point in time, 2002, was the CEO.
Yes.
So one day you invited me for this discussion, and it was a webinar, so it wasn't physical.
Right.
And I was like, oh, and I had his book. I had Brandt Pretorius' book, and I was like, my God, this is like a legend.
For sure.
And I mean, it's only women that are in motoring like myself. I mean, I think other women would talk about Gucci and, all of these lovely brands. I have nothing against them, but for me, that's a legend. And you involved me in this meeting, and that was amazing. Tell me about Brandt Pretorius and why do you think he is such a phenomenal?
Well, first of all, he and I are exactly the same age. We were both born in 1948. So I phoned him in January and I congratulate him on whatever the year is.
All right.
And then he phones me in June.
So he's going to be 77.
He's already 77.
Jeffy, you still look like you're 55. Okay.
You're really fine. But I met Brandt at the time that I joined the RMI through Derek Dixon. I'd heard of him, but Derek Dixon, when he interviewed me for that temporary role within the RMI on the fuel side, he said to me, and you're going to need to find a chairman for the RMI, someone who can really take us to the next level, a visionary and so on. And he said, why don't you go and see Brandt Pretorius, which I did. I flew down to Durban, told Gary I was going, Gary McCraw, and I walked into the office. I remember I was sitting, I had an appointment obviously.
What was Gary McCraw at that point in time?
Same as he is now. He was director of NADA.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So I was sitting outside Brandt's office waiting to go in, see him in Durban for this meeting, and I wanted to ask him. And a senior guy walked past whom I knew, and he said, what are you doing here? And I said, I've come to see Brandt. Oh, really? And I told him. He said to me, Jeff, he said, good luck with that one. Brandt is so busy. It was at a nightmare period for Brandt. It was during the unbundling of the McCarthy's clothing apparel section, and it was a very challenging time for Brandt. He'd recently left Toyota, joined McCarthy's, I don't think fully realizing the extent of the challenges that would face him. And he said, Brandt is, and he was up to his eyeballs. I thought, oh, well, okay, I'll take it on board. But anyway, I went, I spoke to Brandt, gave him my vision for the RMI, and I had a lot of, I thought, different ideas. I wanted to make the RMI more of a commercially focused, member-focused organization, as opposed to being the old civil service type of labor structure that it was before as the MIF. Anyway, saw Brandt, typically Brandt, great listener, asked the right questions, listened to me, and he put his hands together and said, you know what, Jeff, I will make the time. I will make the time.
Wow.
So he came on as a member of the board, and the board immediately elected him to president, which he served for 5 years. Okay. So, that's why I said it was such an important, he was a gift to me. It was.
At that point in time, he was the CEO of Toyota.
Correct. No, at McCarthy's. He just joined McCarthy's, and he was facing this nightmare situation.
Okay. What was his position at DSA though?
At
Toyota.
He was a senior director.
Okay, senior director.
Reporting directly to the Honourable Doctor.
Yeah.
And I think everyone thought that he would stay on.
Right.
But he chose to go this other route. He chose to go from OEM to retail.
Okay.
And that was a good fortune of so many, because he saved Bront, and he can tell the story better than myself, but he unquestionably saved so many jobs, so many careers. He saved McCarthy's from absolute bankruptcy. So, I mean, he's worthy of every bit of recognition and accolades that have come his way over the years.
Wow, that's
but
amazing.
I mean, there are people who can testify that. We spoke about transformation earlier on. Temba Corsi, his history is fascinating. Temba Corsi Pansi, who worked for Brad for a while, and now he's at Avari Cars.
Very good friend of mine.
He worked out of a little shop down in the Eastern Cape, cleaning toilets, as he tells the story originally.
Yeah.
Then he joined McCarthy's, met Bront, and Bront gave him that opportunity.
Wow.
He saw the potential in Tembi, and that was the beginning of his career.
I actually did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay. And now he is the vice of NADA. He owns his own
vice
dealership.
chair of NADA,
and
an entrepreneur.
one of my very good friends.
So I mean, there are so many. I mean, I could never even begin to compare with what Bront has achieved in this industry over the years. But I've been honoured to have known him all these years. I've been honoured to be a friend, not a close friend, but a friend, a colleague. And I had the benefit of his guidance and his mentorship. He gave me a lot of, although we're the same age. I mean, he gave me, because he had a perspective on the industry which I didn't have.
Yes.
I'd come from an oil industry perspective. He was in trench motor industry. So it was a very complementary relationship, but I was the main beneficiary. There's no shadow of a doubt where that's concerned over the years.
Okay, so Jeff, I have to ask you the question that a lot of my people ask me about you. What keeps you looking so young and vibrant? I got the inside info this morning. It's it's a swim in the morning, whether it's winter or summer. Okay, which I don't know how you do, and I'm going to try it. If I get sick, it's all on you, Jeff. But 6 o'clock in the morning, cold water, a swim, and you are still riding horses. And he doesn't take any sugar in his tea or coffee, so sugar is a killer, and too much salt. Right, we know that. What else?
I think the short answer, Desh, is that I'm blessed to have good genetics. Okay. My father lived to the age of 95, so did my mother. And my dad, when he was 80, he was still predominantly black hair.
Wow.
And he was incredibly healthy. He never saw a doctor in the last 20 years of his life. He never bothered to see a doctor. So, I'm blessed with that. I don't have any medical conditions at all. I'm not on any form of medication.
Right.
But
I'm just going to do the Indian thing and knock on wood, okay?
Yeah, look, I'm not fanatical, but I think a healthy lifestyle is important. A balanced lifestyle.
Okay.
So I'll eat everything and anything, but in moderation. Very little salt, definitely no refined sugar. I think exercise is critical. I think keeping the mind.
You said 3 kilometers walking per day?
I walk a minimum of 3 Ks a day, horse ride on occasion. I swim almost every morning I swim.
Okay.
But then I do additional laps. I go to a bigger pool, and I do that a couple of times as well a week. I have a bicycle as well. I ride my motorcycles. And I'm mentally very active. I read a great deal. I've got a very big and comprehensive library at home. One of my hobbies is military history.
Wow.
So I read a great deal. And I think keeping the mind active and a balanced lifestyle. And then, of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention that my dear, beautiful wife, Marcia, is a nominal 29 years my junior.
Yeah, I know.
So that too keeps me young. And my lovely daughter, Storm, who's a 16-year-old teenager. They both keep me young as well.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, because you have this, I know we spoke about this off camera as well. You have this passion for life, the zest for life. How Is it because of the activities? Is it because of Marcia and Storm, who's, by the way, a big part of my life now?
Sure.
So is it because of that?
I think diverse interest is important, and I think many people, unfortunately, for whatever reason, maybe because they don't find the time, they don't have hobbies. I'm talking about men now who retire and so on, and suddenly find themselves with nothing to do. I've always had an active hobby running parallel with my career, and I said I was fortunate enough to have been in the motor industry. So this petrol head, you know, my hobby at home has always been collecting and rebuilding classic cars, and I built up quite a large collection at one stage, which I've whittled down quite considerably. But I still have a massive workshop at home full of every tool you can imagine. And I still keep my hand in. I still service my own vehicle and climb underneath and drain the oil and jack it up and do the brake pads.
Well, thank God, because my husband does the same. So I'm going to have him around for just as long,
Send
if I
him
stay
over.
around for that. But let's talk about that, mental health. What's the best way, Jeff, to beat, you know, it's becoming a pandemic. Mental health illness is becoming a pandemic.
Sure.
How can we beat that?
And it is. It's not to be underestimated. It's a pandemic globally, and there's so many things I think that exacerbate it and that add to the pressures that can lead to depression. And you know, I'm certainly no expert. My wife is more so because she is academically qualified in that department. But it's something that should be taken very seriously, and I think people need to feel able to talk about it. I think it's so important. If one feels depressed or concerned or anxious.
No, that was not my question. I have a lot of doctors that sit here. I want to know, how do you personally deal with a situation where something depresses you or upsets you? Reaction is very important. How you react to a situation is what's going to determine that healthy future for your mental self. How do you do it?
Okay, that's a great question, and I'm not too sure it works for me. And I remember reading about this somewhere a long time ago. In fact, one of the chaps I met in Australia told me this. He said, you know, there is the tendency, the inclination to become depressed or anxious and stressed about a situation. He said, when that happens, he said he uses the 5-second recipe. I said, what's that? He said, I count backwards from 5 to 1, where I just stop, take a deep breath, and I count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I deliberately make a point. And he said it's mental discipline. It's the discipline of the mind. It's taking your mind out of that state that it was prior to the countdown, which could have gone in a negative direction. Get out of that and come out of the countdown thinking something else. Think something positive. Think about something else. There's always something else that's a better thought. Don't allow yourself to be, you're bound to be drawn into negative thought, but don't dwell there. Acknowledge it.
Manifests.
It manifests. So it's a form of mental discipline. And it's not the power of positive thought. That's a different topic. It can lead to positive thinking. But you can't be positive about everything. Negativity is reality. Challenge is a reality. Stress is a reality. And I have a lot of stress. All my life I've had stress. But it's how you manage that stress. Try and turn it into a positive force. It should never be destructive. The minute stress becomes destructive and you feel your senses getting the better of you, then it's a downhill trend. Stress is a challenge, and stress is there. Animals live on stress. You know, flight, fear and flight. Horses, buck. Everything's related to stress. They're alert. So you need stress to be alert, to be aware. But it should never be allowed to take you into a negative mindset where there's no hope. There's always a way out. And the other positive, realistic thought is, whatever you face today, think about it quickly and also come to terms with the reality that it's not the first time you've been in a similar situation. And you know what you worried about before didn't happen, or you got out of it.
I heard that. Half of the things, or maybe 90% of the things you worry about is never going to happen.
And also it's something I try to do, and I tell my family as well, if you, I'm not saying ignore, don't be in denial, don't ignore what's happening around you, but just think about it quickly. Is there anything I can do right now to change the situation? If you can, then do it. If you can't, walk away.
Absolutely.
Concentrate on something else.
I learned that from you, Jeff. I literally learned. I learned from a lot of people. My guru, and everybody knows that, is Sadhguru. He's my teacher from afar. I love his sayings and his quotes, and he's just his way of life. So it's not a religious thing. It's just a philosopher that I believe in his philosophies. But it's your strength. Last year, I had been through some mental, challenges, and I found you, and I met with you as well. And you are my inspiration. You are my inspiration. You are the person that I look up to the most physically that I've ever met physically.
Well, that's a very generous
and
comment and statement, and I'm humbled by that. Thank you for that.
It's the truth.
And I'm always here.
It's the truth. That's why you always, as long as you make yourself available for me, I'm going to be, latching on.
Well, 95 minimum if I go by my family lifeline. So
from your lips to God's ears, at 95 you'll still be around. Jeff, thank you so much. There's so much that we want to grab from this conversation. I just want to ask you, you are a huge part of Motoring Woman of the Year Awards. Aside from Talk the Talk and every other initiative that I have, I think that's one of the biggest movements that you are part of. Anything you'd like to say to this year's finalists? There's 36, 9 provinces, 10 groups, and 28 brands. We are halfway through with the vetting, and MFC, as usual, are doing the most to put out the most beautiful, better than before event this year.
Wonderful.
So, and you're a big part of it. Anything you'd like to say to our viewers, or to the 36 ladies? And actually, we had 4,300 nominations. Wow. So, to all of them, to every woman in the industry, what would you like to say?
Very briefly, I'd like to say very clearly and unequivocally that it's extremely gratifying to see where these ladies have gotten to and what they've achieved, and they've more than vindicated the original vision and all the hard work and passion that you and so many others have put into this transformation. And it's so gratifying to see this reach the level that it has, and it just continues to grow. This is not the end of your journey, Dish. There's more to come.
You keep telling me that.
It's an ongoing journey, and I absolutely love it, and it gives such a sense of warmth and admiration for these ladies. And in addition to that, I've been a beneficiary of this transformation. You've mentioned names already, ladies I've met and worked with and had conversations with, Martina Bean, Alexia, Marcia Mayaba. I have been the beneficiary of their positions because I've learned from them. So, there can be no question, no debate at any level regarding the level of contribution that ladies make to this industry, that they make anywhere and everywhere, quite frankly. But to this industry, they have transformed the industry at almost every level. So this to me is just a combination of all of that. It's a vindication of what has been done to get where we are, and it's just a great, grand event, a celebration of what you have strived for and what you've achieved. So, I love being part of it. I'm humbled to still be part of it. And it's just wonderful to see these ladies going up there and receiving their well-deserved awards. Absolutely amazing.
And thank you for allowing the access to Storm Osborne, who's your daughter, and Marcia as well, who is a great supporter, to assist me in this event. I think over 10 years it's natural that we become family, and Akash and my family have become yours, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
And with all my people, including the Van der Waals, Van and Dirk Van der Waals sister, the daughter, the youth. We're trying to bring the youth into this now. My son is studying law. This is his first year, and he will be a huge part of this movement. Also becoming a motivational speaker around the country with me from this year with Daimler Truck. So we will be doing a lot of work with them as well.
Wonderful.
So it's so important that we start, like how you came on board to teach me. I believe I have a responsibility being led by your footsteps to teach the youth.
Right.
Okay, because I might, you call me a spring chicken, but I am 43. I'm midlife now, going through midlife crisis, and I think we need to share this knowledge. So thank you. Thank you, Jeff. We are definitely going to be sharing snippets of this interview, and I wish I had the time, and it's not a wish, I must make it happen, to document more of your life, because you are a legend. And I'm going to keep saying it, and I'm going to keep reminding people about it. Just like Dole Ledley had passed on 5 years ago, and Andre Potgieter, who had been a huge part of the foundation of this. I will never let these phenomenal men's memory fade, because without their contribution, this wouldn't have happened. Peter, we just lost now.
Right.
He was a motorsport legend as well.
Absolutely.
The Lindenbergs, who I spent the last weekend with.
Yeah.
These are legends that have dedicated and that have given so much of passion to the motorsport industry. So thank you.
So Desh, let me say, if I may, in closing, so you very generously describe me and others as your mentor. But let me say, without a shadow of a doubt and with absolute certainty, that I have learnt possibly more from you than you've learnt from me.
No.
So unwittingly, and I think the same applies to so many others, and you're probably not aware of it, but your contribution, your wisdom, your passion, your vision has taught myself and others plenty. Thank you for that.
And now the tissues are lying on his table, and every time Jeff comes, he makes me cry, and that's just because I have so much of respect for you, and then it comes from you, for you saying that and keep validating that. It makes me, I think you psychologically, what's that called, blackmail, psychologically, emotional blackmail, because I'm the one that complains to you about, Chef, I'm tired, I think you're doing this to say, Desh, you have to go on, and you do contribute to that energy.
And I have a lot more to learn from you, and I look forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for all of your engagement on our platform. We definitely are here to change lives, and we want to extend our gratitude to our viewers for engaging with our content. As I mentioned earlier on, when Jeff started with me, we had less than 5,000 followers. We are now on a 40 million reach after 7 years, and we have more than 150,000 followers. And that is very, it's not a huge millions of followers, but for a woman empowerment platform like ours, to be the biggest in the world, Women Empowerment Automotive platform, it is huge, and it is with the help of people like Jeff Osborne. Our non-profit initiatives, including the Motoring Woman of the Year Awards, powered by MFC, Evo by Nedbank, and the Talk the Talk Studios, supported by Sariti Solutions, focus on honoring and celebrating the women in the South African motoring industry. Our mission goes beyond storytelling. As I said, we strive to make a positive impact on lives. Together, we are dedicated to empowering and uplifting women within our industries. So, ladies, I'd like to leave you with this thought today. I want to encourage you to take risks. So I think, Jeff, you will validate that if you do not take that risk now and then, it's a little bit more difficult to achieve the bigger things in life.
Sure.
So when you think about the things that you will regret when you're 80, not that Jeff is 80 yet, they're almost always the things that you did not do.
Sure.
Is that true, Jeff?
Avoid comfort zones.
Right,
Yes,
right.
yes.
So there are acts of omission. Very rarely are you going to regret something that you did that failed and didn't work. And trust me, 90% of the things that I do, I fail at actually. So take that leap of faith, push yourself, and always remember that the question should never be, who's going to let me? It should always be, who's
going to stop me?
Thank you.
Well said. Absolutely.